All right, today's video is going to be a little different than my usual topics or usual videos because I'm actually going to have this videos mainly focused on many of you out there who are strong activists and you've decided you want to engage with the Republican Party in Washington State, which means you are the rebellion here in this state. But the question is, people oftentimes ask me, how do I grow the party here? How can I try to make a difference? Now, it's kind of a big deal because when you look at the general mood of Republicans or conservative folk in America today, they're pretty happy. Donald Trump just won. The election's over. But now kind of the party's starting to fade. How do we actually reorganize locally so that you are an effective group and an effective team trying to make a difference and move that cause of liberty and freedom just a little bit further ahead? Now, here's why I have a fairly strong opinion about this is because for many years, 15 years now or so, I've been traveling around the state and I oftentimes speak at Republican functions all over Washington State. I've been doing this for a long time. Sometimes I'm an MC, sometimes I'm the speaker, sometimes I go out there to do training. And the advantage that really just gives me is that I travel all over the state. There are 39 counties in Washington State. I've spoken to almost every Republican club and in pretty much every county. And I have seen a lot of changes and different ways of doing things all around the state. So I'm going to base this mainly on some of my experiences that I've had in seeing what works and what doesn't work and just give some new suggestions, hopefully. If you're brand new to the party, you're brand new to activism, I've been encouraging people to be activists for a long time, and you've decided the party is going to be where you want to be active, hopefully this video will give you a couple of pointers and tips on how to perhaps do a little bit better job or maybe a little bit more effective job than what you're currently doing now. Now, I know there's lots of fights because most of the voting is going to go on to see who controls which of these parties, between the rhinos and the Republicans, right? The conservatives are the mainstreamers. The libertarians versus the conservatives. I mean, this battle really, the factions within the party are kind of a never-ending thing. I've been seeing this for a long time. The Tea Party days, the Christian Coalition days, the Ron Paul days, just ever since I was a college Republican, really going back to my college era. This fight is an endless and eternal struggle on the faction controls inside the party. But regardless of who takes over, or who occupies those seats of leadership in the party, the question is, how do you actually make your party grow and don't just have basically, hey, I won, but exactly what do I do now? Because that is a common question. And I've seen this dozens and dozens of times all over the state of Washington in the past, and I'm going to see it again here in another month or two. So I'm hoping this video is going to be a little helpful for you. Now, oddly enough, I've got some very good advice once from, of all people, Dwight Pelz here, who was the former chair of the Washington State Democratic Party. What's funny about this is that literally this is him. It's a picture of him, and he looks exactly like the witch doctor in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. In fact, I used to post photos of the both of them up together. And this is a number of years ago when Dwight Pelz was still chair because it was just like a doppelganger. It looks the same. But nevertheless, despite his appearance and despite kind of a nasty attitude and reputation that he actually had some really good advice. And I got this advice because in addition to going to a lot of Republican events, I used to also go to some Democrat events until they started throwing me out, and then I would send other people to go there and just report back to me on what they observed. And at the Central, it was the Washington State Democrat Party's crab feed, where they do supposedly a bunch of activism training. Dwight Pelz actually gave a great presentation called How Not to Run a Boring Meeting. And despite the nasty reputation that he deservedly has as a political kind of pit bull in a way, he actually gave a really, really effective presentation, one that I wish I could repeat and give to every single conservative and Republican group there. So I don't have that whole meeting right now recorded with me. I had somebody record at the time, I should say. But I do want to just reiterate some of his basic points because there was a lot of wisdom and information there that despite coming from a Democrat, is just as applicable to Republicans today. So, how many of you have been to a Republican meeting around Washington State anytime in the last 5 to 10 years? And you watched it descend into an argument for what seems like an endless period of time arguing about Robert's Rules of Order and getting into all kinds of petty and just minor arguments over sometimes nothing, and it just drags on like this. And you feel like you're at this meeting here today, kind of pictured right here. That's what it looks like. And in fact, Now that these new people who just got involved in the party, they just wasted 4 hours of a weekday night, or God help you if it was a Friday or Saturday night. And how many of you think that those people want to come back and do it all over again next time? Right? They're like this. They don't want to come back, most of them. They've decided that was painful enough, and they're done with being involved in the political party. Maybe they'll come for the Lincoln Day dinner, but that's about it. This is a problem if you're trying to run an effective organization and just do anything meaningful. Now, part of the problem is you're always going to have gadflies and people who utilize the opportunity to do things like, hey, please look at me. Let me draw attention to you. I memorized Robert's Rules of Order. And in fact, I found 3 paragraphs that should have been written differently. And I think it's a good use of time to spend 4 hours arguing about those 3 paragraphs or whatever. Maybe your faction lost the officer fight, so you're vindictive and you want to come back and create more drama. It's hard to define exactly what people's motivations would be when they're involved in the political process. But it comes up and it happens everywhere. Also, you always have those types of people who essentially they're only happy when they can have a fight or an argument. It's how they define their happiness, how they define their reason for existence on this planet, and they just have to fight. And it's always easier to fight with people who you're familiar with, just like you'll see families do that sometimes, or neighbor disputes or something, and the fighting just goes on forever. Some people are just that way. You can't stop this. This is just human nature. There's going to be people like that, then they're very concentrated in the political process. So what did Dwight Pell say on how to have a not boring meeting? Number one, biggest advice that he gave, and again, I'm not saying the Democrats follow this because I've been to quite a few of the Democrat meetings where they don't follow it, but you want to split your meetings between work sessions and public events. You want to have your Robert's Rules of Orders arguments with just your officers and the people who want to define themselves by their memorization of Robert's Rules of Orders. That's fine. There's a place for them. You don't make it secret. You just make it open, and that's where you can have those arguments, but you're not discouraging new people who just want to get involved in the political process and they don't want to spend their time doing that. You make your public meetings, however, where you're not discussing Treasury minutes and minutes of the last meeting and platform discussions or anything like that. You want to make your public meetings interesting and social. Now, when Democrats have their meetings, they're usually arguing, and they'll spend an hour arguing over pronouns or who misgendered who on a Facebook post recently. Republicans will argue about rules of order or something like that, but how do you make these public meetings interesting and social? Well, one of the things that Dwight Pell's mentioned is that you have an interesting speaker who does a 20-minute presentation. Think TED Talks, because TED Talks has done a lot more studying on this than anybody else has, and essentially, after about 18 minutes, people aren't that interested. Have an extensive Q&A, and then have a social time afterwards, usually with alcohol. Now, you don't have to have the alcohol, but socializing is actually quite important, because if you have an opportunity to socialize with people with whom you agree with, you're more likely to go back because there's something fulfilling about being social, and especially if you're in a state like Washington where many people feel that if they're conservative and they're libertarian or they care about those types of issues, they don't know who to talk to, and this is their safe space or the equivalent to it. Any closest thing you're going to get to is a Republican or a conservative. This is their opportunity to socialize with others. Now, the other thing is, and Dwight did mention this in his presentation, and I reemphasize it right now, don't have fewer than one social meeting per month. You don't need your business meeting, the boring meeting, where you're going to be arguing about Robert's Rules of Order and going over your minutes and your treasurer's report. You don't need to do that maybe more than once a quarter, but you absolutely have to have these social meetings more than once per month at least, because it gives people kind of a connection point and a reason for continuing to be engaged and involved. If they feel like they're getting some value out of the meetings, they feel like they're socializing with other people, surprisingly, your group's going to grow, and there's more people going back to be there with you. If you don't have a successful meeting, this is what it looks like. You're putting everybody to sleep, or they're looking so frustrated they never want to come back. Here's the other thing, then. I want to get into this a little bit because for Republican events in particular, this is a big part of what most Republican groups around the state, any of the active clubs, this is what they're focused on. And again, I'm kind of focused on the county level more than I am at the state level here. But this is that a Lincoln Day dinner is essentially the event that the Democrats call them, they used to call them the Jackson Kennedy dinner until Jackson was too racist, and then they've come up with some other name for their events now. But the Lincoln Day dinners are essentially where Republicans raise money, and there's a couple ways to measure the success of a Lincoln Day dinner, and these are really the only things that matter for a Lincoln Day dinner. Did you raise money? Did you do a good job raising money? Did you raise more than you did last year? Did you make a profit? Not just necessarily gross income, but the actual profit that you brought in to help your club both continue its operations and theoretically to help future political candidates where you live. Secondly, what was the size of the Lincoln Day dinner? Did you have a lot of people come? Are you growing your effort? Because a lot of people there, you're going to be able to pull out new activists, new people that are interested, people that may want to run for office in the future. And the more people that are there, the more likely it is that you're going to raise more money too. So it's part of it. And are you growing your group so that afterwards you actually have a greater attendance at other events moving forward? Again, the socializing part of the message is really important. There's a lot of us that are wonkish and into the policies and the political issues, and we aren't the ones who should be running the Lincoln Day dinner. You want to have it be a social, fun, interesting, entertaining, engaging sort of event that you happen to raise a bunch of money at. Now, it's not the only thing that you have to do, but basically, if you want your group to grow, my general feeling is that's a pretty high priority. You're not going to be a politically effective entity of any kind at all if what you're doing is you're in purge mode and you're simply trying to purify your group with whatever gatekeeping definition somebody used this month defining what a rhino is or not. You're going to have to basically have a little different approach in how you grow your group. Sometimes the best way to do that is to have people that lost perhaps that leadership role the last time. Maybe you can give them a project that they can work on that they're going to be fulfilled at, they're going to be interested in, and they want to demonstrate their capabilities, and they can organize their, I call these kind of passion projects, really. It's just somebody wanted to put on a picnic, somebody's putting on the Trump festival, whatever you want to call it, whatever that thing is that they're good at, that they like to do. If they're good, get a team going, and it's a way of growing your group and bringing it in. Make it educational and social. You're more likely to have a group that functions moving forward. If all you're doing is putting people's nose to the grindstone, you're going to have a much smaller group down the road than you're starting out with right now. That's just the way it is. In the end, just like anything else that you do in activism or engaging in your community or trying to make a difference, it ultimately is up to you and I if we're going to be engaged. Listen, I'm a Republican PCO where I live in Thurston County. I'm never going to be the chair, don't want to be, and I don't think I'd be good at it, but other people can do that job, and I want to support the ones who are good at it and who are interested in growing their effort and being an effective organization. You should try to do the same thing where you live and try to be less focused on who exactly sits in those seats and more about what they do and whether the actions that they take define whether that organization's being successful or not. You can have political disagreements with people, have them take over the same group that could be in a different faction. It turns out they're actually pretty good at doing this. They're actually good at fundraising. They're good at growing their group. They're good at doing interesting things. It's ultimately up to you and I. We're the ones that make a difference. And only the people that show up are going to be the ones who make an impact. So as I always say, just as a reminder for those of you who want to take over local groups and, hard charging, make a difference where you live, just remember that the future ultimately belongs to those who show up.